serving their time, that they come back with an opportunity to be successful in life. And I think that's what the panelists right here have kind of dedicated their whole life for, is giving people a second opportunity, a third opportunity. I know Sheriff Steve Tompkins also does a lot of important work here. But it's giving people hope, giving people opportunity, and letting them know that, you know, we didn't give up on them, and that we're still here trying to be helpful to them. And although people might look down at someone with a CORI, that could be our brother, that could be our sister or aunt or uncle, and we want to give them a second opportunity to get a job or to get into a job training program. So that's where I'm coming from. And I want to say thank you to the panelists. I want to say thank you to Councilor Flaherty, who also has done exceptional work on this issue for many years, and is always there for returning citizens. So again, I want to say thank you to my colleagues. I want to say thank you to Councilor Mejia, and especially the panelists for your work on this issue for many years. Thank you, Councilor Mejia.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And now, Councilor Flaherty, you now have the floor.
Good morning, and thank you, Chairwoman Mejia, for hosting the hearing. Thank you, obviously, to Councilor Flynn for co-sponsoring this order with me, and for all of his years of experience as a probation officer for the Commonwealth of Mass. And also thank you to the members of the administration and other experts and panelists that we have joining us today to discuss this important issue. Many of us have seen firsthand how CORIs impede a person's attempt to fully participate in their communities and ultimately avoid recidivism. During my time as a council, particularly as my tenure as council president, I created a special committee on CORI reform, and have since continued my personal efforts in advocacy by connecting people to employers and opportunities that are CORI friendly. You often hear me say that Boston is an opportunity-rich and a resource-rich city. Unfortunately, oftentimes many folks and organizations are working in separate silos, and I've always prided myself in being a citywide councilor and sort of being the bridge that connects all those resources together, with an eye towards making sure that those individuals who've paid their debt to society, looking to turn the page and move forward, have opportunities. There are resources available to assist those with CORIs, and there are a lot of organizations out there whose mission it is to connect those with CORIs to work opportunities, to housing opportunities, to healthcare opportunities, such as obviously our Sheriff Tompkins, Suffolk County House of Correction, ROCA, and also I know that we're joined here by Attorney Joseph Feaster of the Urban League. So all great folks and great organizations, well-intentioned to try to make a difference here. And I know that it's been, a lot of things have been ruffled, I guess, with COVID-19. So this hearing is important to make sure that we're keeping our efforts around CORI on track, despite things that have been taking place as a direct result of COVID. So I know I'd have to say that also the Walsh administration, they've made CORI reform and reducing barriers for those with CORIs into the workforce, and they've made that a priority. I'm happy to work alongside of them, but I'm also looking forward to hearing from the leadership of the Office of Workforce Development today, Public Safety, Returning Citizens, SOAR Boston, BCYF, et cetera, about the work that they're doing in our city, in particular their efforts around CORI reform in light of COVID-19, as well as the new Project Opportunity Program. So the criminal record system certainly needs to be part of a larger discussion here, particularly as we talk about the impacts of COVID here in Boston and across the Commonwealth. But there are some very dedicated professionals and experts in this space that we'll be hearing from today, and I just look forward to hearing what they have to say, but also finding ways that we could be working closely together to reduce barriers for all of our residents, to make sure that, again, as I mentioned, if they've served their time and they've paid their debts to society, we just want to make sure everyone gets a fair shake at getting a job, access to housing, access to healthcare, educational opportunities so that they can rejoin society and be productive and law-abiding and mentor others so that they don't make the same mistakes that the individual made initially. So that's it in a nutshell. I look forward to hearing from, appreciate my colleagues joining, and I look forward for productive discussion. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I am going to go next to, and I'm sorry, the person who usually, for my team who's usually doing this is not here with me today. So I'm going to have to depend on my colleagues. I believe the next city councilor that I saw on the screen was President Councilor District 7, Kim Janey. Opening up to you if you're interested in any remarks. All right, so I'm going to assume that we're going to move on. Oh,
We cannot hear Councilor Janey.
okay, now I can hear. We can't hear you. Unmute yourself. Carrie, let my sister live. Can you let her talk? We can't hear you. Oh, you're good. Carrie, call us. Text me what you want to say.
I would suggest that we go back
I'm
to
gonna move on to the
Councilor
next.
Janey
I'm
in
gonna
a
go
few minutes.
next. Got this. We're gonna go next. I'm gonna go next to the next is District Councilor Liz Britton from District 9.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm very interested to hear the panelists this morning on this very important topic. I think it's really important that folks get a second chance and be able to enter the workforce and be successful. So I'm very interested to hear what the advocates have to say about CORI reform and how we might make things better. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to go to District Councilor Ricardo Arroyo from District 5. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to our panelists here today. I was a public defender before this, but I think all the data and all the studies and all the things that we know show that if you can help stabilize lives and reduces all kinds of harmful and negative community impacts, and stabilization really centers around whether or not they have employment and a steady source of income, whether or not that income meets their needs, whether or not they have housing. And this is a major part of that puzzle. Work brings a feeling of dignity. It brings a whole bunch of different things. It brings the ability to live in a productive way. And CORIs for far too long had been almost a complete barrier. And now we're in a situation where any kind of improvement we can make for folks who really need the ability to find work, are happy and willing to find work, are trying to find work, that they have the ability to actually work. And so this is an important hearing. I thank the makers and I thank the panelists, and I look forward to hearing ways in which we can make this better and ways in which it's working as is, if so, and ways in which we can really improve on what is working if that's the case. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Arroyo. I'm going to go to at-large Councilor Asabi George. You have the floor.
And thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you everyone who's here today. I think that this is going to be certainly a robust conversation, just thinking about the panel that is before us this morning. So I'm going to save my comments maybe for a little bit later because I do want to get to this. I think what most of us would say is a highly regarded panel of guests today. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the makers.
Thank you. I'm going to go next to Councilor Campbell from District 4. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Councilor Mejia, and thank you to the sponsors for bringing forth this important topic. It was important before COVID-19. Now it really is, given that everyone's economic situation is exacerbated because of COVID-19. And so we want to do all we can to eliminate any barriers. I am absolutely looking forward to the conversation. I do want to add that obviously Councilor President Janey and I just introduced an ordinance with respect to eliminating someone's credit report and credit history as a barrier to employment, which is also a major issue, but connects very much to the CORI issue. So wanted to flag that and looking forward to hearing panelists' thoughts on that as well. But thank you for the work you do. Again, thank you to the sponsors and thank you, Council Mejia.
No, thank you, thank you. I am gonna go next to Councillor Bach from District 8. You now have the floor.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Grateful to the makers for this important hearing, and I just want to thank, I was able to join the Office of Returning Citizens last week for a really great conversation about housing, and I know that certainly coming out of kind of the affordable housing world myself, I've seen how much CORIs are a barrier to safe and stable housing for folks, which really then becomes a barrier to rebuilding life in a lot of ways. And I know I see multiple folks on the call today who from Trin and Joe Feaster who have made their way through housing work, even though they're doing some other things right now. So I just really, to me, that's a very important piece of the puzzle. And I'm looking forward to this broader conversation. And yeah, I just wanted to thank Kevin again for having me chat with our returning citizens who I think can in so many ways be real models of what civic engagement and recognizing the preciousness of getting to be knit into community really means, and I think can be really powerful advocates for themselves. And so looking forward to being an ally on that front. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I believe that we have been joined again by President Council District 7 Councillor Kim Janey. Are you with us?
I hope so. Can you hear me?
Absolutely. You now have the floor.
Okay, there was a problem with the audio. It was not muted, but for some reason it wasn't connected. Thank you so much for your patience. Thank you certainly to the makers, Councillor Flynn and Councillor Flaherty. Councillor Flynn, you have been just a huge proponent supporting workers and workers' rights. Certainly CORI is a big barrier, so thank you for your leadership. And Councillor Flaherty, longstanding history and advocacy on this issue. I remember when Governor Deval Patrick signed this legislation, the CORI reform legislation. In fact, we just celebrated the anniversary. It was, I think, July or August. It was summertime, and it was at the Freedom House. And, there's still a lot more work that has been done since and needs to continue to be done in terms of making sure that we have removed barriers and created a level playing field and really an opportunity for folks to re-enter society and become productive citizens in our society and making meaningful contributions to our communities. And so I am grateful for this opportunity. I will say now that I do have to take another call and will not be able to stay for the entire thing, but will review the tape. Want to also give a shout out to the panel, especially Mr. Feaster for his leadership in this space and all the work that the Urban League has been doing in terms of workforce development. And finally, Madam Chair, thank you for your leadership in all you do. I'm looking forward to a productive conversation with some clear action steps following up. So thank you to all.
Thank you. Thank you. So we're going to get right into the panel, but before we do, I just wanted to thank everyone for being here. I see people who are out in these streets doing the work every single day, many of you who I've worked with alongside you, so I'm really happy to be here and to chair this hearing, and more importantly, it's really about what happens beyond the hearing. Sometimes we join and we have a hearing about a hearing or a meeting about a meeting, but I really am looking forward to listening and then taking action on what we hear and to ensure that everyone has the resources that they need to get this work done. So thank you all for your leadership. And I am incredibly humbled to see this panel in this day and age, and grateful to my colleagues for bringing us together. So let's get to the business at hand. I will turn over the conversation to the panel. Director Miranda has some time constraints, so we're going to begin with him. So Director Miranda, you now have the floor.
First of all, thank you so much for inviting us to share testimony about the CORI and equitable access to employment opportunities, second chances. Those things speak to the heart of ROCA. For those of you who don't know much about ROCA, it's an organization that's been around for 30 years, and the goal is really to decrease the cycle of incarceration among young people, 15 to 24, at the highest risk of gun violence, at the highest risk of domestic violence, at the highest risk of rearrest. A few other things that you should know about us is we're a behavioral health organization that's really rooted in cognitive behavioral therapy as a method. We do use brain science to guide our understanding of young people and their traumas. And because it takes the young people that we work with on average 6 to 18 months to make significant changes or to even attend 60 consecutive days of work, we're not a 6-month program, we're not a 2-year program, we're a 4-year program. Calendar year to date at ROCA Boston, we've been working with 178 young people. We're actively in contact with 60% of them. 70% of our young people are engaged in employment, educational, and life skills programming, and 62% of those are engaged in employment programming. That said, a few things about the CORI that stick out from doing on-the-ground work. The first one is literacy and comprehension. Many of our young people struggle. A lot of the young people that we work with on average are disconnecting at about the 7th or 8th grade with education. So there are struggles with literacy, and on top of that, there are struggles with comprehension. I would say the second area that may be a barrier is also just knowing your rights, knowing basic rights about the CORI. For example, many of our participants don't know that when you first apply to a job, the law makes it illegal for most employers to ask any questions about your CORI when you first apply. They don't know that an employer must give you a copy of the CORI report before asking you anything in the report. And they don't know that if an employer decides not to hire you because of your CORI, that the employer must give you a copy of the report. They certainly don't know that you can seal things or correct things in the CORI. The third thing I would say is communicating to employers about the CORI in a professional way. And the last thing I'll say is that there's inconsistency around the use of the phrase CORI friendly. Sometimes employers are friendly to some charges, but not others. So what do we do as an organization to help with these barriers? When we get a young person involved in ROCA, we immediately involve them in our workforce readiness curriculum. And that curriculum includes modules of not only understanding, but also communicating the CORI. The second and perhaps the most important thing that we do is we develop partnerships with local employers and staffing agencies that become employment pipelines. This helps to mitigate some of the things that, some of the barriers that the CORI imposes on some of our young people. The third thing is we do train our staff on CORI rights and knowledge of the CORI. And the final thing is we do use cognitive behavioral therapy with our participants to help them to really emotionally regulate themselves when they're having to communicate about their CORI to employers. The job market is tough right now. Our young people are competing with other kind of more qualified candidates at the moment. So it's not an equal playing field. So anything that we can do to make it a more equitable playing field is great. And I'll take any questions if anyone has any.
Thank you. I'm going to first off ask our co-sponsors to see if they have any questions. I'll go to Councilor Flynn first.
Yeah, thank you. I had a question about what would the next step be after the landmark legislation that Governor Patrick signed? What would the next step be in terms of mobilizing and working to even strengthen the ability for returning citizens to, do more work on their CORI or give them a better opportunity to engage in job training or housing or employment opportunities? What's the next step politically that we need to do to, to expand the legislation passed by Governor Baker.
What's the next step politically to expand more equitable access?
Yeah, I think that's.
What are your thoughts when you're thinking about next steps?
Well, as a probation officer, the frustrating part for me was when one of my probationers would get a job offer and literally be starting the job, and then the company would conduct a background check, and at that time, the background check, the CORI would pop up in the background check, and that probationer would go from being proud to have a job with dignity to returning to my office in the probation department, discouraged, humiliated even, knowing that he got a job, but this past keeps staying on top of him, preventing him from employment. So that is a critical issue. So I'm trying to figure out what is our next step to prevent that situation that happens to probably many people.
Yeah, it's kind of a broad question about what we should do politically. I would say that speaking for our participants, it's imperative that they know what their rights are, that they know how to read their CORI, and that they know that they can seal things and correct things in their CORI. And anything that we can do to help those initiatives, those three things are important to me. I can't speak broadly about what are the next political steps. I feel like my work is a bit too on the ground. I can just speak to the work that we do on the ground, but I appreciate the question. It's imperative. I almost feel like you should be answering that question.
Well, you made a good point there, Carl, is because when my guys would come to me and their first time, I'd look at their CORI with them and would go over it. Sometimes it would be a 12-page CORI. Sometimes it would be a 2-page CORI. But I could almost guarantee it, there's a mistake on the CORI. And there's cases that are still opened that should have been closed, by the clerk's office in various courts. But it's important for people with the CORI to read a CORI, know how to read it, and know what steps to take place if they think there is a mistake on their CORI. It's very difficult at times even just to get your CORI, as many people.
Absolutely.
So those types of initial steps, I think, could be helpful.
Thank you.
I think basing any political action around those initiatives would be great.
Thank you, Carl.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Flynn. I just want to let you know your time is up. So I'm going to move on to Councilor Flaherty, if that's okay. I want to keep the conversation going while we still have Director Miranda here. Councilor Flaherty, you now have the floor.
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one question for the director. I just want to get a sense as to perspective on what sort of employment sectors are better than others in terms of the interest from your client base at Roker. So what's that path or that sort of that job, whether is it obtaining a CDL and going to work for a company and trucking, receiving, delivery, that type of stuff, or is it more on the computer science side of the house, and or where do some of the sort of the Roker clients, where do they want to work and where are those barriers? So we in government, kind of probably dovetailing on Councilor Flynn, is where can we in government start to kind of move in that direction? There's clearly a lot of jobs out there that need filling, and I'm sure that there's a certain segment that will reach out, certain employees will reach out to and partner with Roker, but some of Roker's clients may want to be in a particular field or going down a completely different road, but because of the barriers to entry there. So how can we in government sort of eliminate some of those barriers to entry so that we can get sort of I guess a wider representation of employers in Boston to take folks to CORI?
Yeah, thank you very much. It's an important question given the direction that our participants take. I would say that because of where our young people are disconnecting with education, they do struggle with literacy, they do struggle with comprehension. So oftentimes during their work with us, and it's a period of, it can go from 2 to 4 years, our program is 4 years, they are making improvements in literacy and comprehension, but sometimes not where we would always like them to be. That said, the sectors that make sense for a lot of our population are going to be in logistics, in entry-level logistics types of employment opportunities. And for the ones that are able to get their high set, the CDL industries definitely are a place for them. And anything you can do in those two sectors would be helpful.
And Carl, that's where I have my the success that I have is as a former Teamster and someone that obviously still has their CDL. Anytime you can encourage someone to get their CDL license and either get them into the Teamsters Union and/or any other company that is looking for shipping, receiving truck, that's usually a pretty good path. And obviously down at the Ray Flynn Marine Industrial Park on the seafood processing and the warehousing side, I've had tremendous success down there as well. But obviously, there are folks that probably want to do other things, and we really need to get some of Boston's bigger employers to buy in. And to get some skin in the game here, and not just have it be sort of our Teamsters and our labor organizations in building trades, but also you talk about and I see it regularly. I mean the CEOs, the number of CEOs that want to move their companies to Boston because all that Boston has to offer. We boast the best colleges, universities, hospitals, and network of community health centers in the world. We're a livable, walkable, relatively safe city. And that's desirable. Investment is going to continue despite COVID. Investment continues to come to Boston, and employers are bringing their companies here. The problem we're seeing is that we're not seeing that economic opportunity trickle out to our neighborhoods. And the pushback is, well, that we don't have a prepared workforce, or they'll bring their employers with them from neighboring jurisdictions, states, et cetera. So I want to try to sort of change that trend and make sure that we do have a pipeline of a trained workforce. And I think whether it's working through ROCA, Urban League, even Suffolk County House of Correction, our city's Workforce Development Department, all these organizations and agencies have a role to play. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for the work and the support.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. I just wanted to say that I've been having some issues with my internet, so if I do move on, I'm going to ask the sponsors of this hearing to continue the conversation. I'm going to move on by a show of hands, and I believe if you could just show to my colleagues if you have any questions for Director Miranda. Now is the time to raise those blue hands, and if you don't have any, I see Councilor Bach. You have a question, you have the floor.
Thank you so much, Councilor Mejia. Director Miranda, I just wanted to ask quickly a follow-up about the eviction ceiling. Do you find that, now I think it's right, there's different waiting periods in Massachusetts. Is it like 3 and 7 years? I have some recollection. And then I was just wondering, I know that in some states, people need a lawyer for those motions, but I think here they don't. What do you guys see in terms of the assistance and support that people would need for more folks to get those records sealed? Because I think of that as something, to the point of Councilor Flaherty and Flynn mentioned, whether it's providing resources or changing something in the process to make it easier, that feels like the type of thing that we can work on.
Absolutely. I think it's a great question. I'm not prepared to answer that question at the moment, but I'd be happy to provide you with written testimony afterwards.
That's fine. We'll follow up. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. I'm going to, seeing no other blue hands, I'm going to move on to our next panelist. Director Miranda, you're more than welcome to stay, but I know you have other places to go. Really do appreciate you and the work that ROCA is doing to support our most vulnerable young people. So thank you for all that you do.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you everyone for inviting us to share our testimony.
Thank you so much. I'm gonna move on to our next panelist. If that's okay to my lead sponsors, we're good to go? Okay. I'm gonna move on now to our next panelist, Rufus Falk, who's the Director of the Office of Public Safety. You now have the floor.
Good morning, councilors, and thank you, Madam Chair, for the invitation. My name is Rufus J. Falk. I'm the Director for the Mayor's Office of Public Safety. I've been in this role for a little over a year now. This office was created in 2014 to be that department that addresses some of the gaps and some of the issues that arise in this public safety space, whether it be around violence prevention, whether it be around sort of breaking down those silos internally, and also making sure we cultivate relationships with some of those external partners to address some issues around, which are sort of what we're talking about today, the impacts of CORI. And so two initiatives that I want to sort of hit on, and before I even get to that, it's sort of interesting that we're talking about CORI and sort of the ceilings of CORI is in partnership with Office of Workforce Development, Office of Returning Citizens, and SOAR Boston. We created an initiative called Project Opportunity that actually hits on that very issue. How do we make sure that individuals who are impacted by CORI, that's one of the downfalls of living in Roxbury. I live in a plane pathway, so forgive me for a second. So we created Project Opportunity to serve as that entity to help assist individuals impacted by CORI to receive free legal services, which are provided by Lawyers Clearinghouse, to see, to have those CORIs either be sealed or expunged, and to see what incidents on their record would actually eligible for doing so. So individuals are registering for free, receiving free legal services, and then within those legal services, they are being made aware of what if they're eligible to have their CORI sealed or expunged. Because we recognize that individuals from the communities in which we're serving, Roxbury, Dorchester, Mattapan, were disproportionately impacted negatively by CORI. We also recognize that just to speak plainly, that a black man without a CORI is less likely to receive a job than a white man with a CORI. So we recognize CORI doesn't impact everyone equally. So we know we have to be intentional around policy that's going to sort of undo some of the unintended or intended consequences around the war on drugs and other policies that sort of over-criminalize our existence living in some of our neighborhoods. So that's where Project Opportunity came from. Office of Workforce Development, Office of Public Safety, Office of Returning Citizens, SOAR Boston, looking at a way to make sure we can interact with our citizens and our residents impacted by CORI so they can receive those free legal services to see if their CORIs can be sealed or expunged, which we know that is a major barrier for a lot of the population that we're serving. So that is our sort of one of our answers to addressing the impacts of CORI. So that's Project Opportunity. And we've had two webinar series, one just sort of introducing the program. The second one, we were highlighting the opportunities within entrepreneurship and small businesses, because we also recognize that a lot of our individuals who we are working with were impacted by CORI want to start their own businesses, want to sort of create other avenues outside of the industries that we have available to be able to create a living for themselves. So how can we make sure that they're being connected with those resources? So Project Opportunity not only tries to seal and expunge records, we're also trying to make sure that we are connecting our residents who are most impacted to resources in the program, whether it be internally through the city or externally through our partners, to make sure that we are making a seamless, we're creating a seamless network of resources and advocacy to sort of support our individuals most impacted. So that's just a small sort of commercial around Project Opportunity. One of the two other programs I just want to make sure I hit on were Operation Exit. To date, we have 104 graduates of Operation Exit. Operation Exit is a partnership between the building trades, YOU, and a variety of other city partners and external partners, but we make sure that we are connecting with those individuals most likely to be harmed by gun violence or to harm someone by gun violence, and try to help them transition out of that lifestyle into a career. These are the individuals who, if not plugged into Operation Exit, might find it very hard to be able to find a career because they either lack the academic credentials or they just don't have the work history to be able to earn a livable and working wage living within the city. So Operation Exit, to this day, we have 104 graduates. Immense success. We are trying to expand Operation Exit beyond the building trades, recognize that everyone doesn't want to be a construction worker. So we're trying to build other partnerships outside of the building trade, whether it be tech, whether it be in these other spaces. So any help we can get from the councils in terms of some other industries, we're trying to look into the health industry, but I think a lot of our sort of efforts right now have sort of been slowed down due to COVID, but we're trying to be innovative in that space. And the last program I will discuss is Operation Renew, which is a partnership with Office of Returning Citizens, Office of Recovery Services, the Gavin Group, and the Federal Probation Department, where we are connected with individuals who are on probation with federally, helping to assist them getting skills training and then helping them transition into employment. Today, we've had 12 graduates. We have 2 more in the pipeline who are going to be graduating soon, and then trying to transition them into more gainful employment. So just from a public safety standpoint, we are trying to make sure that we are coordinating with every city department who touches this space, externally, trying to make sure we further our partnerships around how do we get preventative also, so get people before they get a CORI. So we're trying to do it on both ends. Stop individuals before they engage and get themselves a CORI. Then for those who are impacted by CORI, trying to make sure we remove any additional barriers. So trying to be on the ground, trying to be innovative, and just trying to be effective as possible. So I will be quiet from there and be ready to answer any questions.
Thank you. And Rufus, I would just have to say you're not trying, you're actually doing. So we're using asset-based language, and you are doing an amazing job. And so you're not trying, you are actually doing. So thank you for your work. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you, Counselor.
I'm gonna first ask our sponsors if they have any questions, and then I'm going to ask my colleagues to please raise your blue hand if you are interested in asking questions. So I'm gonna first go to Councillor Flynn.
Thank you, Council Mejia. I'm going to hold off on asking questions. I'll give my colleagues an opportunity to weigh in.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Flynn. I'm going to go to Councillor Flaherty. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Rufus, just sort of one area you sort of touched on it, or at least it made me think where there could be sort of a barrier right now, and it's our district courts are not on all cylinders right now, and I have to assume that that's going to make it very difficult for individuals that you are working with and servicing to remove defaults and or maybe to get a record sealed or expunged just in light of COVID. So maybe we could try to identify ways where we could work closely together, having spent time as an assistant DA and then now obviously in the defense bar. I know that I believe Councilor Arroyo is still on joining us, and he's got some defense bar experience, but maybe if we could put our heads together and work with the trial court, because I have to assume that you could have a young individual that's sort of looking to turn the corner. They may be hung up on sort of a couple small defaults, could be for a Chapter 90 violation, could just be really de minimis, if you will, but for the fact that that's still an open matter and or he can't remove the default and have it closed prevents he or she from kind of moving sort of through that process to put it behind them. So, and then obviously same on the expunge and the sealing, just getting the appointments, getting the time to have the motion filed and heard under COVID. I got to think that all of that stuff is being sort of pushed aside, and that would be a serious impediment, I think, to folks that we're trying to help here. So, but I appreciate the work you're doing, Rufus, in your circles, and let me know what I could do in my capacity to sort of navigate some of the impediments that are in place because of COVID.
Absolutely. Thank you, Councilor. And I'll make sure that, so the my thought partner and sort of the person who's really driving this initiative is the Deputy Director of Office of Workforce Development and Programming is Bethany Sirota. And would it be okay if I get her and I and you on an email just to sort of further discuss this?
Yeah, that'd be great. Happy to help and try to see if we can get some stuff moving through the trial court to help people, whether it's small default removals and/or just some small stuff that's kind of hanging out there that can be resolved, almost arguably administratively with the district attorney's office and/or the trial court, so that we can get folks moving through the system. It would help folks at Roker, it would help people at Urban League, it obviously would help the people that you've been trying to help. So it's all about moving forward.
Thank you, sir.
Councilor Mejia, could I just follow up on Councilor Flaherty's comments, Rufus? So Rufus, do you think with the homeless situation we have in Boston, many of them are on probation, and they probably do have a lot of default warrants that are out. I'm just thinking out loud, is there an opportunity for us, as Councilor Flaherty mentioned, to work with the courts and maybe address the default warrants, have them removed, but also it's an opportunity to work with that person to maybe get into a drug treatment program. We're helping them remove a warrant, and also we're trying to help them get into a treatment program. Just want to see what your thoughts might be on that.
Absolutely. So myself, Deputy Director Sirota, and Director Gentration from Office of Recovery Services literally just had this very conversation about making sure that we tie our initiative together. Recovery Services are doing a lot of good work in that Mass and Cass area, Clifford Park, and some of these other spaces that a lot of our homeless individuals are living at. And we wanted to make sure that we sort of include our efforts and make sure that there's some synergy amongst what we're offering at Project Opportunity, some of the other resources and some of their efforts. So we're actually we had that conversation last week, and sort of we're building that to be a part of this overall initiative. So whatever help that you can offer in that, council, would be amazing.
Yeah, thank you, Rufus. I'll stay in contact with you. I have some good contacts in the court from my previous experience. So let's touch base maybe tomorrow. Okay.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm going to recognize, I believe, Councilor Campbell texted me and said that she wanted to say something, but I don't see her hand up.
Yeah, so hi, Councilor Mejia. For some reason, I'm on my phone because my laptop my technology is acting up this morning. Okay. So my blue hand situation doesn't work. But I'll continue to just listen to all the panelists, so you don't have to come to me. I'll just ask something at the end. But just wanted to thank Carl and Rufus for their work if they have to jump off. So thank you.
No worries. And don't worry, Councilor Campbell, if you need to say something at any time, you could just always text me and I will give you the floor. I am the chair of this hearing, so I have reserved the right to allow people to speak. So don't ever apologize for wanting to be a part of the conversation. You were going to, no other hands?
Thank you.
Okay. I do want to ask Rufus in terms of what else as counselors, and in terms of budget, I mean, the budget is next year. We're going to go through that whole cycle again. I'm always thinking about what resources do we need, because we always have these conversations. It would be really helpful to me to walk out of here with some really clear definition of here's 2 things that my department needs, whether it be resources or just connections. Like, tell me 2 things that we can go out into these streets and fight for on your behalf to help support the work that you're trying to move forward. Just give me 2 things.
Yes, ma'am. I think the first thing would be around, we need to sort of fortify our sort of pathway into these other industries. So if that is making a direct connection with somebody who's a business leader in a certain space, and recognizing that we're not asking any one business to take on 100 employees, but if they can take 5 or 10 individuals, that's 5 or 10 less individuals that we have to try to find employment for later. So any connections, any relationships that you might have with some business leaders who are in a space that be willing to take on 2, 3, 4, 5 employees at a time, I think that would be greatly helpful for a lot of the work that a lot of the people on this call or a lot of these panelists are doing. I think the second part is, which is less budget related, but more around narrative. How are we changing the narrative around individuals who are impacted by CORI? I think there's still a stigma attached to individuals who have returned home from incarceration, who have been living within our community for years, who have been productive, but it still feels like they still aren't fully accepted and still aren't fully intertwined back into society. So what can we do around narrative to show that not only are we accepting of these individuals because they are our brothers, sisters, and cousins, but we value their input and their experience. We recognize that we can't achieve this one Boston without them being fully entwined and ingrained into society. So I don't know what that is. I think it's more of us sort of in every neighborhood speaking around the necessity to invest in these individuals, invest in programs to work with these individuals, but more importantly saying that they have something to offer. And in order for Boston to be all that Boston can be, they have to be not only just present, but they have to be in positions and places of leadership. So I think just impacting the narrative and helping us make more formalized partnerships with industry leaders and business leaders so we can help find placement for the individuals that we're working with.
Thank you for that, Rufus. I really do appreciate that feedback. And as the chair of Small Businesses and Workforce Development, I'm committed to working in partnership with you and your colleagues who are trying to move this work forward. And I'm saying this in the public record. Hold me accountable to that. And my office will be following up with Neil so that we can figure out how we move this work forward. I'm going to go on. Absolutely. I'm going to go on to next Talia Wright Rivera, who is the program director of SOAR. And unless my colleagues, I don't see any other blue hands, so I'm going to move on to our next panelist.
Good morning, everyone. Unfortunately, I have to run to jump on another call, but I'm going to leave you in the capable hands of our service delivery manager, Dave Jefferson, who can give you just more in-depth details about the population of kids that we're working with and how CORI impacts them.
Thank you. So good to see you, even if it's only for a little bit.
You too. All right. Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to turn it over to Davo. Davo, you now have the floor.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for having me be a part of this panel. I'm Davo Jefferson. I'm the service delivery manager for SOAR Boston. Formerly a street worker program. SOAR is an acronym for Street Outreach and Advocacy. In response, we serve the ages between 14 and 24. And these are folks who are actively involved with gun and gang violence and or who are also in leadership roles or have some kind of influence within the gang that they're in. We have 24 street workers who are now called outreach engagement coordinators, and they're deployed to various hotspots throughout the city where there is a gang presence. We have 6 resource coordinators who are charged with cultivating relationships with different educational institutions, employers, and various service providers to create pipelines so that the folks we're working with are easily connected to resources and opportunities. We've been able to create partnerships with Jiffy Lube, with AutoZone, with AT&T, and more recently, Myers and Chang and Flower Bakery. These opportunities allow us to get people entry-level employment. Many of these opportunities have livable wage jobs. And some of the things we're working on is creating relationships with employers that will allow opportunities for folks to have career growth and not just entry-level opportunities. More recently, also, we assist people with advocate in court-related issues, housing-related issues, or healthcare-related issues. More recently, we just helped a young man who was shot and did not have healthcare get himself established with Mass Health and also get the healthcare bill that he had, which was roughly $3,000. We got that bill back paid for him. Those are some of the services that we work with the young people with to help change the life trajectory for where they're at in life right now.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Davo, just curious from my colleagues, I'm going to ask you to raise your blue hands if you have any questions. I'm going to first go to our sponsors. Councillor Flynn, you now have the floor.
No, I don't have any questions at this time, Councilor Mejia. Thank you.
Okay, no worries. I'm going to go to Councillor Flaherty. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. David, just want to say thank you for the work that you do and the continued partnership, and let us know what we can do to continue to work together. So appreciate all your efforts.
Thank you.
Thank you. My colleagues, by a show of blue hands, and for those who don't have the blue hand function, you can always text me. But I do have a few questions, and I'm not sure, Davo, or if you or anybody else who's still here might be able to address this. But you know, I'm thinking about the, and this might be a little bit controversial, but I am known to be such. I'm just curious about the cannabis industry as an emerging market for employment opportunities for people with CORI. I'm just curious about what opportunities exist in that market and what those relationships are looking like. And if this is not the space for this conversation, then I totally appreciate that. But I do hear that oftentimes those who have been impacted by the war on drugs are usually not having an opportunity to be able to benefit from that. So when we think about workforce development and we think about emerging markets and we think about equity and race, I'm just curious as to whether or not we have an opportunity to look into this particular market for job opportunities for people with CORIs. And anyone can answer that question. And if this question is inappropriate, then I defer to my council colleagues to let me know about myself. But if someone can speak on that, I would appreciate it.
Well, I'm a certified career coach, and I've seen bud tender job descriptions, and I don't see why a person that we work with wouldn't be qualified for one of those opportunities. So I would highly suggest that that be something that collectively we take a look into, seeing if there are any pipelines that can be built. It is an emerging industry, and I see it as something that'll only get bigger. So I think it would be really smart to see what could be done to connect folks to opportunities, remove any barriers that currently exist that would prevent a person, in regards to the population we're speaking about, that would prevent them from getting entry-level employment opportunities in that field.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because when I think about that field, it's there's many opportunities. One is around marketing, promotions. There's also, you know, understanding the biology of the plants. I mean, I just feel like when it comes to that particular job market, there seems to be a lot of barriers, and this just seems to me like a natural fit. And I'm just curious why we haven't explored that, but I'm intrigued by that and looking forward to exploring that a little bit further. Davo, yes.
Also, a lot of good things were mentioned today on the panel. I would like to also suggest that Boston were really big on eds and meds, and could that be something that we look a little bit deeper into, entry-level employment opportunities, and with all of the colleges and universities that we have and all of the healthcare facilities that we have, it seems like there will be an abundance of employment opportunities that can be tapped into. And what can we do to remove barriers that prevent folks from accessing those employment opportunities?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I also wanted to just say, and then I'm going to move on to the next panelist, but you know, back in the day, I used to be a public health educator, and I used to pass out condoms all around. I was the condom lady around my way. And then I had some kids that lived across the street, and I knew that they were, you know, they were dealing. And I would give them condoms, and I would say, listen, every time you sell your little dime bag, why don't you give a little 3-pack of condoms and you keep your clients alive, you know? At first they were like, nah, miss, you crazy. And then it got to the point where they started knocking on my door and asking me for condoms so they can distribute, right? I think that oftentimes we have a hard time looking at what leadership looks like, and also really figuring out how do we utilize these transferable skills into other spaces. And I think that these moments require us to really think outside the box in terms of how we're preparing our young people for the workforce and making sure that we're doing things in ways that are relatable to them. So really looking forward to working alongside you, Davo, and Talia around the efforts that you're trying to move forward and bring about. And I'm not sure if any of my council colleagues have anything to say. Andrea, Councilor Campbell, just so you know, I could see you, if you do the unmute option, then I can tell whether or not you want to speak.
No, I just for the sake of time, I'll give all my time to all the panelists so they can go and do their presentations, and I can save any questions for the end. Okay. But thank you, Councilor Mejia.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on. So that's cue that I should do the same because we are having a shortage of time here. I'm going to go next to the next panelist. Davo, thank you so much for being here. You're welcome to stay and enjoy the conversation that we're having today. So I'm going to go next to Kevin Steebley. He's the Executive Director of the Mayor's Office of Returning Citizens. You now have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Real briefly, the ORC was created to assist individuals as they are released from incarceration in areas of transitional housing, education, health, and employment. The ORC also brings organizations together to identify gaps in services and other impediments that lead toward recidivism. That being said, within the last 2 years, we've been able to put over 350 individuals in workforce programs and in front of hiring managers. However, the obstacles due to CORI are considerable. People impacted by CORI find it increasingly difficult to obtain employment and housing due to discriminatory regulations surrounding by having a CORI. Now, there were a couple of questions that I want to kind of lead toward. There are terms like suitability, unreasonable risk, having good character, and these are all determined from a CORI. And that type of language is in and throughout different hiring documents, including the Code of Massachusetts Regulations, the CMR. There are certain regulations that restrict people from having, as the conversation just was introduced with the cannabis industry, if you have a no contest or dismissal or continue without a finding on your record, it makes you ineligible for working in those industries, not to mention having an actual actionable item on your CORI. So as Councilor Flynn alluded to, politically, what can we do? We really need to examine our CMRs for these regulations. Yes, we eliminated the check the box. However, this language continues to exist behind the scenes in restricting individuals from going into careers. Many people do not know that if you want to be a master plumber, you have to go in front of a licensing board. And if you get there and you have a CORI in this current climate, you will not be considered to move forward with your mastery. And that is the same in many different areas, being a real estate agent, and a number of professions that would be suitable for a person to raise their family. So so as we look at what are some next steps that we can do, we need to really look at the CMRs, see how they restrict individuals from moving forward. We have to begin to challenge this new and emergent industry, this cannabis industry, because of the restrictions that exist within that industry. I can share I will forward and share the documentations with you. We've been reviewing these things because these are clear discriminatory regulations that are being created to identify a very specific group within our population. The credit, we have seen a number of issues. We've helped nearly 900 individuals in the last 2 years that we've been in operation. And the credit issue is something that I appreciate that's being addressed with Councilor Campbell, because the talk is, well, it's not your CORI, it's your credit. Now, if an individual is being rejected, and we've seen this case quite a few times, that they received a letter that their credit was considered in their employment application, as opposed to their CORI background. So that is a backdoor opportunity for someone to be rejected that's legally on the books. So I reserve the rest of this for questions, and thank you for this opportunity to discuss this with you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm going to first defer to the sponsors of this hearing, Councilor Flynn. See if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to add at this time. You now have the floor.
Yeah, just wanted to follow up briefly on when I mentioned a job applicant going for a job, getting the job, and then starting the job, and then the background check coming back with the CORI, and then the person being let go. What is the point of at that point, what is the point of the background check if the person was already hired based on his background and experience and the job applicant in the interview? They had faith in them that he's doing the job. Why at that point would a CORI be, a background check even be necessary? I was trying to figure that out for a long period of time.
In many cases, the employer is following a set of guidelines that they have, that they put into, and many times is an archaic law, that they're just following the procedure of a full hire. Mm-hmm. So what we have done is we've challenged those hiring managers to say that person's charge has nothing to do with what they'll be doing. If this person was, had a charge of shoplifting and now they're working with waste management, where is it? There's no connection. So that CORI should have nothing to do with this person's second chance and opportunity to make an economic life for himself and their family.
Yeah, right. I agree. I wonder if there's a list of convictions that might be, we might be able to look at that are on a CORI that, going forward, they shouldn't be part of the background check or impact someone from getting a job, especially low-level type crimes, and especially if they happened so many years ago. You think of it, why would that have an impact on someone's ability to try to get a job in any type of field? So maybe just something we can continue working on and thinking about.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Councilor Flynn. Councilor Flaherty, you now have the floor.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Kevin makes a great point. The piece about the credit worthiness and the need, I think, for another leg of the stool here is on the financial literacy side, and making sure that we're doing the best we can to kind of educate folks about how that plays. Again, if solid credit and/or kids that and/or families sort of bank with sort of the traditional institutions and have no idea in terms of the role that plays on their credit history. So very important point that Kevin raised. So that's something else I think we need to look closely at, and making sure that on the financial literacy side that the organizations that are represented on this at this hearing, but also out there trying to help making sure that that's sort of part of their program as well, to educate particularly the young kids of how important it is and how it does come back and can be a barrier. So we're going to be eliminating the entire credit portion of it. And I think to some degrees we'll have some success in certain sectors, but not on the highly regulatory side of the house, financial institutions, banking, securities, cybersecurity, all those, there's a lot of jobs out there that are highly regulated that, that'll be an impediment, a bar for employment. So we need to address that as well. So great points, Kev. Appreciate the work you're doing.
Thank you, Councilor Flaherty. I'm just curious as to whether or not any of my colleagues have any questions by a show of blue hands. Okay, I do. I'm going to have a quick question for you. I'm curious in terms of whether or not there is a way that you're tracking who are the employers in the city of Boston that are really are doing a great job at working in partnership with the city to support your efforts. And I'm also just as curious to know which are the employers that have not been doing such a great job with the city and that could use a little bit of a push, if you will.
Absolutely. Well, we want to work in a positive nature, Madam Chair. There are some organizations that we utilize. Community Work Services is an amazing program that we use, and they help to not only identify where our potential employees could use work, but they help them bridge that gap and that knowledge gap and move them forward. We have a number of employment agencies that we use because we know that they're out there, and those employment agencies like Express Employment, Massive Staffing, they are wonderful in understanding the individuals that we use. In our very own Office of Workforce Development, they have been outstanding in providing funding to help us pivot to more resilient industries like the technologies, to be able to provide stipends and education in areas where folks of color just have not been accepted and have not, and in return, haven't looked into it. So those, we've been working in some areas, and then there's some agencies that it's not that they're bad, but what is happening in the HR areas of these companies is that they do not understand how to read a CORI. You can get a CORI that's 1 inch thick, that's full of dismissals. And if a person gets that, they're like, oh, this person has a CORI. So it's an overall understanding and teaching opportunity for us to move forward to help our HR partners to understand and maybe to assign a person to actually know what a CORI is, know how to look through it. And just because it's thick doesn't mean it's bad.
That's right. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. I'm going to go to, in the interest of time, I don't see any other blue hands. I know that we have a 2-hour limit with our public hearings, and we're moving along nicely. So I'm going to go next to Joseph Feaster, who is counsel with McKenzie and Associates. You now have the floor.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for having me participate. I want to thank particularly my good and dear friend, Michael Flaherty, who is the one who requested that I participate. Madam Chair, I'm going to wear a different hat because I'm bringing my role as the chair of the Urban League to this conversation, also the co-chair of My Brother's Keeper to this conversation. But I'm going to take a little different tack because I don't practice in this area, and I have so many experts who do this work, and I call it God's work. Yeah. But I've had an interest in this area for many, many years. And as a lawyer, I did go back and read to find out exactly what the status is with regards to CORI reform. So I'll just answer. I see that Council President Janey is not on right now, but it was August 6, 2010, when Governor Patrick did some reform on the legislation, and then again in 2018 when it was done. But I'm going to come at this in terms of a different way, because I've thought about this over the years. I've been an employer. I was administrator at the Housing Authority, town manager in Stoughton. So I've looked at it from the standpoint of an employer as to how you can address this. And we have certain rules, federal and otherwise, with regards to what we did at the Boston Housing Authority. So I'm going to come at it from the standpoint of some of the things which I think are important. And as a resident of, and having been with the NAACP and lived in Boston most of my life, I go back to what Rufus said. Part of the thing that we have to do as far as returning citizens is to educate societies. I could never understand why we would say that one has served their time and treat them so horribly when they come back into the community, both from the standpoint of how people perceive them, but to say you can't get work, you can't get housing, et cetera. So what the heck do we expect them to go back and do? Why are we being concerned about recidivism? So I used to have this debate consistently from a policy standpoint. It just made no real sense to me. So what Rufus said, I wholeheartedly agree with as far as educating there. Now, hey, we can talk about all of that all we want in terms of what people are going to believe and perceive what they wish. So therefore, just like I did when I had children, I don't believe in this thing of timeout. I won't be specific about what my timeout was with regards to my children, who my daughter's 40-something now, but she would be able to tell you. She loves her daddy. But nonetheless, the issue is, from an employer standpoint, what I became concerned about is this. If you're going to ask me to take, because this is a risk of an employee that has been incarcerated, has a criminal record, then what we have to look at from a policy standpoint, and we do it in a lot of other areas as far as providing incentives. We have to first, I've said this and no one seems to listen to me over the years, we have to deal with immunity from prosecution. Because yes, there are going to be some persons who are going to do things just as any person in an employment situation, not focusing strictly upon a person with a CORI, but can you imagine if in our litigation society, a person with a CORI gets hired, does something at a job, hurts someone, does something such as that, that employer and everybody else is sued. So I've always said, if you're going to tell me to take the risk, then you have to give me some levity. Now we have in terms, you can't, certain amounts you can't sue the Commonwealth over, things of that nature. So I'm putting on the table immunity from prosecution. The other thing is, in terms of training, as I began to look at and review what the CORI requirements are, and Kevin pointed out clearly, and I believe that the first speaker did, as Miranda pointed out, people don't understand exactly what their rights are under in getting things sealed, getting things expunged, what things employees can ask. Councilor Flynn has asked multiple times as to, well, why people do things after. Well, the rules now say you can't ask them at the initial interview. You have to do it at a particular point in time. So there are a lot of rule pieces, and maybe Davo does it, maybe Miranda does it, maybe there's other organizations here that do that, but it's the education not only for the individual who is a returning citizen, but also for employers as to what they are. So I have the education, I have the attitudinal change in the community, and I have the issue of immunity from prosecution. Now, it's interesting that I was invited to this hearing because I reached out last year to Sheriff Tompkins, because programmatically, we have training programs at the Urban League of Eastern Massachusetts, which anyone can participate in, but I didn't have a program, and I felt consistent with what I just stated about my own feelings and beliefs, that our returning citizens were not being provided the opportunity. And those of us who are in housing, I know Councilor Bach came from a housing arena as well. We know that the situation is that when one comes to speak to a landlord, is the landlord going to take a risk if there's a possibility that if something happens, one's going to say, well, you knew that the person had a record. Why did you have it? So we have to think about immunities in those particular areas as well. For us at Urban League, we would like to set up some type of training program directly that would be helpful to returning citizens. And that was a conversation that I still want to have with Sheriff Tompkins to try to see if we can establish that. We're looking at program areas in where we can be helpful, not to duplicate what people have. We may be able to partner with, provide some of our skill sets, some of our resources. And then lastly, yes, is going to take the need to educate landlords and employers. And I think that, the city can play a role in that, as well as some of the community-based organizations. So that's where I will stop. But I look at it from the standpoint, Madam Chair, that, but for providing some type of immunity, most employers, most landlords are not going to take the risk.
Thank you for that. I really do appreciate your honesty because it really helps us understand what are the barriers coming from all sides. So I'm going to ask Councillor Flynn if you have any questions or comments. Now would be a great time, and then I'm going to move on to Councillor Flaherty and ask my colleagues, and then I do have some questions.
Thank you, Councillor Mejia, and thank you to Joe for all your work for so many years on so many important issues in our city. I had one question, Joe, and I agree with you on the immunity aspect. But I also think if we want to really get returning citizens engaged and back into society, what about with these great companies coming into Boston? They're coming into the South Boston waterfront, they're coming into the downtown area and the Prudential area. What about during the development process is asking them to take a look at hiring people with CORIs, whether it's during the construction phase and or hiring people with CORIs in the actual company, giving them an opportunity to start at the ground level at the very beginning, and maybe considering giving them some type of incentive, whether it's a tax incentive. And what you would have is you'd have a strong company hiring people from the community, but you would also have a strong neighborhood in the many neighborhoods of Boston. Maybe it's South Boston, maybe it's Dorchester, maybe it's Roxbury, but that returning citizen has the dignity of a job. He goes back to South Boston, or she goes back to Dorchester or Roxbury or East Boston with a job with some dignity. They're paying bills, they're paying taxes, and they're contributing. Maybe there might be some incentives to give companies to take a look at that.
Councillor, certainly that's an admirable, and I also, I can't remember specifically, but there was a governmental program that provided incentives along that line, not dealing with returning citizens, but in other areas, and I just can't recall specifically. I mean, that's a possibility. I think we have to, as Kevin Sibley pointed out, we have to try everything in that. Now, granted, what I was saying earlier, joking seriously about, I'm into, sometimes you have to have requirements that people need to follow. So therefore, if, say for instance, you had in zoning and you said, fine, part of what you have to do, you have to hire persons who have previously been incarcerated. Well, you have to see if that would work. If you talk about it in terms of incentives, you have to try that, see if that works. The presumptions are that, at least for the Black and brown communities, that the racism won't step into the way of that in terms of, because for some, what will the incentive be for them in order to do that? Is the incentive large enough? So I would say to you, that's worth a try. I wouldn't, all of these things, just like all of these trying to break down these barriers, it's been an evolutionary process, and we can try it. and see how successful it is and then evaluate it at a point in time. So I wouldn't dismiss it, Counselor. I would definitely encourage it if that's a possibility.
Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. Councillor Flynn, do you have any other questions, or could I move on to Councillor Flaherty?
Yes, you can move on. Thank you, Council Mejia.
Thank you. Councillor Flaherty, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning.
I'm sorry. Wait, Councillor Flaherty?
That's why it's important
I'm out.
to have lawyers as part of the conversation, just to be able to deal with the real life.
Okay, Councillor Flaherty?
Yeah,
Wait.
can you hear me, Madam Chair?
No. Hold on one quick second, Councillor Flaherty, because I know I have internet issues, so I don't know if it's on me or you, but there's something happening with the way you sound. And if can folks shake their heads, are they hearing the same thing that I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay, so the problem is on your end, Councillor Flaherty, you sound like you're underwater. So I need you to move your computer closer to the router or something so that we can be engaged in the dialogue.
Is that a little better, Madam Chair?
Thank you. I think everyone would appreciate that. Thank you so much. Now you have the floor. Keep on.
Very good. Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, Joe. Joe absolutely nailed it on the immunity piece, spoken obviously, and I think it's important to have lawyers in the discussion because they see the real life implications, the indoor scenarios that pop up, and that was one of the issues that we dealt with when we brought folks down to meet the employers down at the Ray Flynn Marine Industrial Park, and that was one of their main concerns, that they were willing to sort of take the shot, take the risk to give folks a fair shake, but they didn't want it to kind of come back and bite them. And their concerns was exactly as you described, Joe, the slip and fall in aisle 4, and they see Dr. Summer off, and then they schedule the fall MRI, and then they see the specialist in the winter, and the meet is running the entire time, sort of on a workers' comp claim, and then they see their workers' comp rates go up. So having some built-in immunity on that is critical. I don't think it needs to be completely open-ended. Maybe it's a 3-month or a 6-month or a 9-month or maybe a year, but that was probably the biggest impediment for some of our larger employers that, with the warehousing, freight forwarding, the seafood processing, the cold storage, like a lot of really good companies, great jobs, by the way, good wages, good benefits, but that was their real concern, was that they take in an individual, and then 2, 3, 4 days or a week later they're dealing with a lawsuit. So you nailed it on that one, and trying to find a way around that I think is critical for some of Boston's largest employers to be able to participate here and to partner with us. They're going to need some type of some backup, at least for a short period of time. Again, I don't think it needs to be open-ended, but incentivize a little bit at the same time, have them willing to take the shot, take that risk, and then we work with them on that. So, Joe, while I have you, can you just touch base maybe a little bit on my brother's keeper and quick update on that, and how we can continue to partner on that?
Certainly. I just wanted to thank you very much, Councilor. I wanted to just amplify just a bit on what I was referring to for the immunity. That's one area. I want to give the example. I don't do much litigation, but I know there is much out there. I'm thinking of the situation that occurs, the employee that's returning citizens at the employer, gets in a fight, injures somebody. Both people get terminated because that's the company's policy. The person who's injured sues the company because of the situation that occurred. That's the type of immunity that I'm talking about. If something has happened, not from the employee using some of the rules of the employer, I'm talking about the circumstances if something happens to an external person. And I don't want to give all vivid examples of what I'm referring to, but there are situations where I can see plaintiff's attorney says, well, Mr. Employer, didn't you know that so-and-so returning citizen had a record? And here's their record, and they had this, they had this, they had this, they had this, what that looks like in a trial proceeding. So that's the type of immunity that I'm talking about. With regards to my brother's keeper, we have a new executive director. As you know, Conan was there previously, and in charge. We have Greg Blaze is the executive director now of My Brother's Keeper. We're still working along. They did a lot with the Boston Public Schools this since during this spring and the summer. So we, like several of the organizations, we're trying to work with the young people around that. We have our association with Be a Man with BAM. So we're still moving forward, still trying to strengthen that particular organization. And now there's some discussions that we want to have as far as some type of mentoring program that will take place with UMass Boston. So we'll continue to grow, but you know, it's a matter of trying. The city's commitment is still there. We still have our board for the MBK, so we're moving along.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I'm going to defer to my Councilor Flaherty. Are you all set?
Yes, I am. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you. I'm going to see if any of my colleagues have any questions. No, okay. So I do have a few questions, and you know, I'm an idealistic, right? I believe that everything and anything is possible. And I'm just curious about when we're talking about employers, are there any programs or training where our returning citizens are given an opportunity to understand what the do's and don'ts are of being in the workforce, right? Because we often have this assumption that everybody knows how to show up, right? So I think that there is an opportunity, I'm sure that already exists, but that when our returning citizens are back and before they enter the workforce, the employer will go through, here are all the things you should and shouldn't do, and you need to sign this contract that you know that you have read fully and understand what the expectation is and how you're going to show up, that everybody does it, not just our returning citizens, but everybody, so that there's a level of accountability there. And I'm just curious, do you know, Jose, if that happens?
I can't speak to that, Councilman here, but that's along the lines of what I would see an organization like an Urban League would do. It's almost like the Dress for Success type of program, because I think that, yes, we do make the presumptions, and depending upon if a person has been out of work with, say, 7 years or more, has been incarcerated for a period of time, and et cetera, we need to address that somewhere. It sounds like to me some of the programs, either where Davio is or either where Kevin is, they do some of that in terms of speaking with these individuals. But that's what my thing is. If you're going to break down the barriers, you want to present the potential employee with the best thing. So if you remove the credit concerns and address that, if you deal with my questions of, well, I want to be immune from prosecution on things. If we can move some of those barriers out, then we're going to get to the real issue as to why people are saying no. And we know that some of those issues are going to still exist. But if we can do all of these things, so I think the training program that you're talking about, the incentive program that Councilor Flynn was talking about, the immunity from prosecution piece that I'm proposing here now, if we can do all of those things, I think it'll be helpful to what Kevin and the others are doing on the ground.
Thank you, thank you. And then in terms of just, you know, the immunity situation, I'm also curious about, you know, we wouldn't even be having this conversation if some of the crimes that some of the young people have committed were not classified as a crime, right? Like there's certain, like this is just some things that kids do, whether it be a fight or, you know, just go through anger management and that's it. But oftentimes they end up getting locked up for things that I think oftentimes is just criminalizing poverty in many ways. And so I just feel like there's some work that needs to happen even beforehand that are more preventative, right? So that we wouldn't be having this conversation. And if we had more opportunities and job employment opportunities for young people, then they wouldn't be running the streets too, right? So I think some of this is prevention. And although this particular hearing is about CORI, I won't go there. But I do think that it's like what comes first, the chicken or the egg. And I feel like oftentimes we are having conversations that in many ways could have been prevented if we had different systems and structures in place to begin with. So I think the work that the Urban League does, My Brother's Keeper, and all these programs that we have here in the city of Boston need to be fully supported and funded so that we can continue to move more on a prevention model and intervention so that we're not feeling these effects
Well, thank you for that. I certainly, my colleague Trin, who was with us at the Urban League for sure, and did a lot of the things to try to help us on our financing. But I also want to point out, Madam Chair, there is some effort on the part of within the CORI law. Like I said, I did some homework this morning where they try to look at mitigating some of this. So certain types of crimes, certain types of juvenile records, certain types, if something is found not to have been, if the law changes and is no longer criminalized like we're doing with marijuana, there are certain things in that regard one can go in administratively or before a judge and do it. And I don't want to presume to be the expert. This is just my quick, fast reading this morning of the CORI laws. So they are trying to address it. But yes, if we can get into the preventative mode, and there's a myriad of organizations that are trying to do it, from our Ys to our Boys and Girls Clubs. We're all trying to address that. There's many organizations in your district that are doing these things. So yes, we have a role to play there for sure. But I think that when we start talking about where we are now as far as the a process that can prevent one from making a positive change in their life, then what you're this hearing here today, what you're having is so important to talk about what ways we can help the Kevins of the world, the Mirandas of the world, the Jeffersons of the world who are in this space to be able to help these young people. That's what we need to begin to look at. And I can't underscore enough, if we can get some employees in the room and get to Councilor Flynn's incentive idea, the immunity from prosecution, I can tell you as an employee, now again, I don't remember all the rules at the Housing Authority, but I think that we would have had restrictions. We have restrictions, as we know, in terms of people with criminal records can't even live in our public housing. So we have restrictions there. So if you have it there, then we have our affordable housing programs. So we already know that wealth is built by several different ways, and if one can't get housing, if one can't get a job, then what are they going to turn to? So, yeah, we have to look at, and I think Kevin raised this, we have to look at some of the barriers there that are there. You asked about the cannabis industry. I was going to comment on that only from the standpoint, I think if you go to the Cannabis Control Commission, that would be prohibitive. That one that has a CORI probably would not be. Now, I don't know if that's for sure, but that's where we'd have to check at the rules for the Cannabis Control Commission, because I know for the owners of that certainly would be an impediment. So I don't know what it would be with regards to employees, but that's something to take a look at.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I appreciate you being here and your patience. I know you were almost second to last, and so thank you for staying here so long. And I look forward to working in partnership with you. I've learned a lot in this short period of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And so we're saving the best for last. Trin Nguyen, you are with the Mayor's Office of Workforce Development, and you know that. But just for the record, would like to invite you to speak, and you now have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Councilor Mejia. I'd love to be last because then I get to hear everything and say everything's all set. My name is Trin Nguyen. I'm the director of the Mayor's Office of Workforce Development, and we always like to say that we love to lead from behind. So a lot of leaders that you've heard from, we've loved to just make sure that things get executed from behind the curtain. So that's what our role and what our calling is, and we're happy to do that. We all know that there's a host of different issues, and particularly now, back in February, our labor market was very prosperous. We had an unemployment rate of 2.3% in Boston, and today we're at 18.9%, which you can imagine how hard it is. And we know that this number is much higher in communities of color. And for those who are looking at or focusing on employment and resources for those with CORI, it just makes it 100 times harder with the economic impact that we're seeing now. You've heard a lot from my colleagues about their efforts and the good work that they're doing now. I'm just going to focus on some of the gap areas or things that have not been stated. So there are a few things quickly. Currently this year, we provided all renewal funding. We staved off all the cuts, and we've made financial commitment up to $13 million to standing partners who prioritize serving low to moderate income residents in Boston, and those who are prioritizing groups for funding with residents with CORI. So that has been a priority in our grant making and policy from day one. And now it has been more in the front lines than ever. And a specific example is that our Neighborhood Jobs Trust, which is one of the most flexible funds, it is still a performance-based contract or grant, but we have really prioritize and make sure that our partners are serving residents with CORI. There are other several programs that were mentioned here that we fund and support over the years. We do have New England Center for Homeless Veterans is our strong partners. Morgan Memorial Goodwill, New England Center for Community Servings, Best Hospitality, New England Culinary Arts, Roca Boston, who you heard from, and Casa Mirna, Vesket, and College Bound Dorchester are all partners in which we support. We've also supported Urban League over the past few years as well to continue their work in meaningful career track employment. As you know, our Youth Options Unlimited here in located right in Nubian Square, we separate, we fund them from our general operating funds, and we put more funds into that program for young people 16 to 24 who have been involved in the criminal justice system as well. And just through the second quarter, our YRU have served 247 young people, and 147 continued on job placements, and including 60 placed in private employer partners as well. And this summer, we've served within just our YOU program 106 young people into employment and career readiness as well. All of our young people in our Youth Options Unlimited program are covered under the tuition-free community college program if they are interested in that post-secondary ed track. So we want to make sure we're removing those barriers as much as possible. And finally, more recently, you've heard Project Opportunity came up by Dr. Falk several times. And I just want to add some of the details to that, that it was a response. This project was designed and research based from the 2018 criminal law, criminal reform law. And the Project Opportunity focuses on those who have more lower level crimes so that we can quickly expunge or seal their records. And the partnership is with the Lawyers Clearinghouse, and they supply volunteer lawyers to meet with residents through a review of their CORI and provide informational sessions through the city of Boston, because city agencies also need to be informed and educated about CORI as well. We have virtual CORI sealing expungement clinics. We have community dialogues with partners to know that this is very important. We have jobs and resource fairs as well. And all the fees around expungement, if they haven't been waived, OWD, our office, covers that and waives all the fees for the clients as well. And since the launch in just 5 weeks, as Dr. Falk mentioned, we served over 300 residents and 175 residents on expungement and sealing. 87.8% were focused on sealing, and 26.8% were on expungement. We know there is a huge need around this clinic because people have questions around whether or not their CORIs could be sealed or expunged, particularly around this 2018 criminal reform bill. I think the bills and policies are great, but we need to really focus on executing them, rolling up our sleeves and taking actions and deconstructing some of this so we can really reduce the barriers. And getting these records sealed is one major area in which we can focus on. Other than that, I'm happy to answer additional questions. What we do is not a panacea for everything. By all means, we should do a lot more. When we were looking at this CORI sealing and expungement, we were looking at Colorado, Denver, we were looking at San Francisco, we were looking at some southern states, and some of them are, I have to say, they're much more forward than us. And so we have a lot to catch up, and we have a lot to learn, and we're focused on it, and there's so much more that we can do. And you've heard my colleagues, and you know that our office is on it. Happy to answer questions. Thank you for all your support. And this hearing is very important. There should be many more.
Thank you. Thank you. I know I'm curious if all your administration colleagues feel that way about all the hearings that we host. But this is really important, and I appreciate you all being here and understanding that these conversations, there are a lot of people who are tuning in, and for the first time are hearing about, what the work that is happening from the city. And I think that Zoom and COVID has really created an opportunity for real civic engagement. So it's such a great opportunity for people to listen and learn and understand the barriers that we face and the work that needs to happen to move our people forward. So really do appreciate you all being here. I'm going to go to Councillor Flynn and then Councillor Flaherty, and I'm going to ask my colleagues by a show of blue hands if you have any questions. So Councillor Flynn, you now have the floor.
Thank you, Councillor Mejia, and thank you to Trin and her team for the outstanding work that you do for the residents of Boston. You play an important role, and I always enjoy working with you and with your dedicated team in helping people. What I like most about this job, even during this pandemic, is on the weekends, on Saturdays and Sundays, is talking to city employees in various departments that I see in the throughout the neighborhoods in my district. Some of them have CORIs, and some of them don't. But I always strike up a conversation. I always thank them for what they're doing, and sometimes their past comes up, and we have a conversation about it. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that, the city of Boston has always been a place where we don't look down on people that have struggled in the past, and instead of walking by them, we offer them a hand up, and a hand up includes giving them an opportunity to get a decent job or get a job where they can get some skills and pay their bills. So I want to say thank you to Trin, and I want to say thank you to those people that had CORIs that are dedicated city employees now, and they help keep our city moving forward, even during this difficult time. They're on the front lines of our streets. They're sweeping the streets. They're under the sewers. They're providing so much needed work that we desperately need in our city. And if we're just so fortunate to have a dedicated city workforce that cares about the residents, and many of them have CORIs. So that's what I think about when I think about CORI reform. That's your brother or your sister or your cousin. So everyone deserves a fair opportunity. So I want to say thank you to Trin. I want to say thank you to Kevin and to the others that are here, Rufus, and to Mayor Walsh for giving our city employees a second opportunity or a third opportunity to get back into society. Thank you, Trin.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Thank you for that. I'm going to move on to Councillor Flaherty. I don't see you here. Not sure if you drowned it or something happened to you. Listen, public hearings are, I'm trying to keep these things lively here, but, Council Flaherty, I don't see you, so I'm going to move on.
Probably went to Castle Islands, Madam Chair.
You better bring me a hot dog or a burger. So I'm going to move on to my colleagues. If you all, by show of blue hands, we have reached the end of our panelists. And now, Councillor Campbell, I'm going to give you the floor.
Thank you, and thank you to all the panelists for the work you guys do every single day. Really appreciate you and hope you and your families are staying safe and healthy. And I've been listening intently because, obviously I care deeply about this issue, not just for personal reasons, having had family members and currently who are incarcerated, but also the district I represent, largely Dorchester and Mattapan, are the folks that are very much dealing with the CORI issue and high numbers of unemployment, even before COVID. And now, of course, as Trin was talking about, post-COVID, it's awful. And so I do think we have to be really creative. I think Joe got to this and Councillor Flynn. But I think, for me, it's also removing stigma and thinking about what type of campaign could we run as a city, as a collective of electeds and advocates to remove the stigma. I think Councillor Flynn spoke to this a little bit. Many of our employees have made mistakes. All of us have made mistakes. We just probably haven't gotten arrested, right? And so how do we run something that I think that's sort of low-hanging fruit that could remove the stigma for folks who have a CORI and that folks see the value in these individuals and human beings. And then the second, I guess it's more of a question, or maybe it's a comment. Trin, we've obviously done some work together along with many advocates with the gaming industry, right? And held this incredible event where folks did not know all of the jobs that were available to them in the gaming industry. Even if you had a CORI, they said, yes, we want you. So there's a lot of industries out there that are already CORI friendly. And I don't think that we've maximized the opportunity there to pull those folks in who don't need any incentives, who already get it, and who need folks who need a workforce. And so we were able to do some creative things before COVID. I think now, obviously, we have to get really creative. But I guess the question is, what industries or employers post-COVID, without any incentive, who are already CORI friendly, could we as a collective be connecting with and pushing for those industries to show up here? And I would love to be continue to be a part of that. And I guess that's my only question. Of course, thanking the advocates and the folks on the ground who are doing the technical assistance to many of these individuals. Resumes, interviews, the skill sets, all of that is critically important. Your driver's license, having your materials ready, all that's also important too. And so, of course, I think we can always resource, whether it's the Office of Returning Citizens with more resources or organizations on the ground that are doing this work, I think is critically important and also something we can do as a city.
Councilor Campbell, to answer some of the questions about who has been with us, Amazon has been a great partner in working with us as we've pivoted in this CORI industry, as well as we have warehousing partners that have been helpful with us, and also the supermarkets have been greatly helpful in hiring individuals who we had in the restaurant and hospitality. We've been able to pivot them in more COVID resilient areas. So those are some of the partners to answer that question.
No, that's helpful, Kevin. And of course, thank you for the work that you're doing every day. But see, that would be really helpful, is how do we as a collective, one, all know who those employers are, and then expand that list and really go in to let folks know that there are folks, even in the midst of COVID-19, who are hiring folks with COVID. And I see your hand, Trin. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with my colleague, Kevin, and I think that's a great question, Counselor. I actually don't think that everybody understand what a CORI is. I think that people have this huge stigma and puts a blank assumption and judgment on a CORI. And if you really look at it, CORIs are a little more complicated. They have different levels. There's some some of them are lower, and they are subject to compliance in other industries and others are not. So I think, one, we have to really inform the public, the community, employers about those breakdowns. The second piece is that when you're looking at an industry, people always think of it as, again, a blanket approach. Let's look at the healthcare industry in Boston. We did this. We said it is a growth area. There are lots of jobs here. This is pre-COVID. And then everybody, when we looked and talked to healthcare employers, everybody said, we can't take people with CORIs. And these hiring managers, when we talked to them, with all due respect, they know their field, they know their work, but they did not understand levels of CORI. And so we worked with the hiring managers in the healthcare industry, I can't say which hospitals, and said, hey, here are some of the jobs in the back end that are good paying jobs, that they don't need to have interactions with patients and customers. And these back end jobs are still good jobs in hospitals and schools. And so we have to really look and work with employers and almost educate and inform them about different complexities of CORIs. So on the one hand, residents with CORI think that, oh, it's a blanket, it's a stigma. And that's why we have the CORI clinics, is because we want to make sure that you're linked to a legal professional and say, let me look at your record and explain to them what it means. And then on the other side, which is the workforce and labor side, we also have to work with employers, hiring managers, and even city agencies. We will be launching this fall with the Office of Returning Citizens and Dr. Falk's group. We're hosting info sessions on CORI to city agencies, because even my colleagues and even I myself don't understand its complexity. And so I think we need to break that down a little bit more and start putting in intentional efforts and thought process that needs to fully understand and break down these barriers.
No, that's a really great point, Tran, and I'm looking at Councilor Mejia, who I think is giving me the eye to move on to my other colleagues. No?
I'm giving my daughter the eye.
Okay.
Trying to interrupt my flow here, and I'm trying to be a chairwoman.
No, that's really, hey, it's great. Let her be. I had a 3-year-old that was going crazy this morning, so I understand. But no, that's really helpful, because I think, I'm always thinking about, there are clearly ways in which we need the federal government to show up, the state to show up, but then there are ways in which we can, through our own power and controls, show up on this issue. So whether it's a campaign on the one side, reaching those folks to say, if you have a CORI, no, that is not the end of your life, we got you, right? And then the other is employers, who are you? And we already know that we're blessed in the city of Boston to have employers who want to employ anyone who lives here. Well, how do we work with you as a collective to make sure you're informed as to what a CORI really is, what a consumer report is, all of that, to break down those barriers so we can maximize the opportunity with respect to folks who need these jobs. And my last question is, and maybe I missed this, I don't think so, is do we have a sense of the numbers in terms of the residents in the city of Boston who may have CORIs or not? Just curious if we have a sense there.
We need more chips.
Okay, so see, there's my 3-year-old who is saying we need more chips.
Yeah, if I may answer that question quickly, Councilor Campbell, I think that's a really important question. We looked at that, and we're trying to get data from the state about those who have, what's the number of CORIs in Suffolk County, and then also break it down to levels of CORI, level of seriousness of those CORIs within Suffolk County. And so we're still getting that, trying to get that data from the state, but that's something that that we need.
So I'm going to, in the interest of just making sure that we wrap up on time, we're a few minutes behind. Councilor Campbell, I'm going to just,
No, I am all set. Thank you guys very much for your hard work. Looking forward to continuing to work together on this issue. Stay safe and healthy.
That's right, go get those chips. So Davo, I'm so glad to see you back here on the screen here, and especially in the work that you're doing. I struggle with the fact that a lot of the jobs that usually are available to our returning citizens, and, as immigrant, who came to this country, cleaning offices, working in restaurants, doing all of this, and supermarkets, I really do appreciate those job opportunities, but I'm really going to really push those who are doing business in the city of Boston to open up their doors to our returning citizens and to folks, because I think we need to move beyond just the traditional types of jobs that may be available for folks, and really push ourselves to really think about how do we really build strong pathways to economic empowerment and justice for those who are coming back into society. And I really do appreciate Joe's comments in terms of immunity, and Dr. Rufus's earlier comments in terms of shifting that narrative. And I think what Councillor Campbell is talking about gives us an opportunity to really bring these worlds together in terms of that narrative shifting, in terms of holding ourselves accountable to having fruitful jobs. And I know, Trin, you had your hands up with that, but I'd like to set some outcomes and some goals that as a city that we're going to work on to ensure that we are doing everything in our power to create real meaningful employment opportunities for our returning citizens. Trin, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
No, it was my thumb. I agree with everything that you say. That's why I said thumbs up.
Okay. Well, you're going to have to clean your camera, because I can't really see what you were doing over there. You all have to come camera ready when you come to one of my hearings, okay? Because I'm going to call everybody out on some stuff. I know that Councillor Flaherty, you were underground for a quick second. Not sure if you, as one of the co-sponsors of this hearing, want to have some final remarks or some questions to share with us. And then I'm going to go to Councillor Flynn.
Thank you. Yeah, I had bad service. Hopefully this is a little better, but I appreciate your time and attention to detail, Madam Chair, and for all the panelists and the guests, as well as all of our colleagues, for what I think is a very meaningful discussion about giving folks that second chance, people that have paid their debt to society, and they're looking forward to move on and put some time and distance from their last offense, or turning the page, being sort of, lack of a better phrase, young and stupid. We've all been there, and we've all learned very valuable lessons, but for the grace of God, we choose a certain path, but could have very well been different for all of us on this hearing. So and I'm all for giving someone a fair shake and providing opportunity so that they could get a meaningful employment opportunities, to get those health benefits, with reimbursable care for our medical institutions, make sure that they have access to quality housing and educational and advancement opportunities. So that's what I'm about. That's how I was born and raised, and hopefully we'll continue this conversation. And I know that all of our great efforts around CORI got sidetracked to some degree because of COVID, like everything else. And just want to make sure that during these times that we continue to pay attention to the great work and the great organizations that are doing that work, and find ways that we can strengthen our partnership and move forward. So appreciate everyone's time and attention. Look forward to continuing to work together. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
And thanks to the co-sponsor.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Flynn.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Mejia, for chairing this, and Councillor Mejia for your important work on this issue for many years as well. Glad to partner with my colleague, Councillor Flaherty, as well, in his work as an assistant district attorney, working on CORI reform for many years. So I want to say thank you to Councillor Flaherty, to all of my colleagues, to Mayor Walsh, and to the panelists especially that are here, that have never given up on people. And that's really the Boston way, is never looking down on somebody and trying to give someone a hand up in an opportunity to a job. The job is the best social program there is and everybody wants to work regardless of your background. Everyone wants to pay their bills. Everyone wants food on their table for their kids. So thank you to the panelists for the incredible work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you. And so at this point, I would like to thank all of our panelists and my colleagues for joining us. I am, as the chair of Small Business and Workforce Development, see myself as a partner and someone who will hold myself accountable to this conversation and making sure that we are being transparent with the work that we're trying to move forward as it relates to this very specific issue. I'm an exponential learner, and I've learned a lot in this conversation. And more importantly, I think that, you know, we can't continue to just do business as usual. We have an amazing opportunity in front of us to figure out how we're going to support small businesses and our returning citizens to see themselves as partners in this conversation. And so we can't continue to be doing this all over the place and then expecting things to change and nobody's ready to do the work. So I'm here for all of it, and appreciate my the co-sponsors of this hearing for bringing it to the forefront. I really do appreciate you being here and hosting us, and as well as my colleagues who have joined us. And so in the interest of not holding anyone else hostage during this public hearing, I think, let me read my script so I can make sure that I say all of this right, because, you know, everything is formal up in here. So thank you to the members of the public. Thank you to the panelists for their testimonies. Before closing this hearing, I believe everyone had already shared their closing remarks. And I will now draw this hearing to a close, and I'm gaveling us out with my bootleg gavel here. And thank you, everyone, for being here. I really do appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thanks, Julia.
Thank you. Bye. Bye. Everybody's done. We're done. Thank you, City Council staff, Central staff. I forgot to thank y'all publicly, but I hope this is still recording. I really do appreciate you all. Thank you.